Well, I think there are a couple of very important lessons. Firstly, the British government, I'm afraid, hesitated for a decade about making a decision to go ahead with nuclear. And during that period, the need for new investment in electricity generation capacity became more and more urgent. So when the serious negotiations started with the French company EDF, the government was in a much weaker position. If the decision had been made 10 years before, maybe soon after 2000, the government would have been negotiating from a strong position. As it was, when the price was finally settled in 2013, the French company held most of the cards, so they got a higher price because the UK delayed the decision for too long. I think the second point is really to try and get as open a tender process as possible. If in the UK we had been a bit more encouraging to some of the alternative vendors, the Koreans, for example, who are building successfully in UAE, the Chinese, who've got this huge domestic program which is going to bring their costs down, the Russians, who've got a technology which is also significantly cheaper. If we'd encouraged all of those people to come in and bid, I think we'd have got a better deal for British consumers and British taxpayers. I think those are the lessons the South Africans should draw. With great difficulty. In a democracy with elections every 5 years, as you say, the politicians' time horizon is short. The problem with the energy industry generally, and particularly with nuclear, is the investment cycle is so long. And the decisions that are made here in South Africa today, in 2017, their effect will still be felt in the second half of this century. So it's so important to get it right. I think for once we've got to try and get the politicians to lift their eyes above the horizon, say what is good for the South African economy. It's already clear that South Africa needs to invest in its infrastructure. That will be economically beneficial. It will also, if we get on the nuclear route, create huge numbers of jobs, well-paid jobs, here in South Africa. And it'll build up a skills base which could become the base for an export industry in the future. But it does mean, for once, you've got to get politicians to take a long-term view. Well, I think it's clear that Westinghouse is not in a position to do that. I think in the case of EDF, it depends on the French government, who they're the majority shareholder in EDF. And I think as long as the French government is willing to stand behind EDF financially, then they can deliver what they are offering to do. I think in the case of the other companies, KEPCO is a very large state-controlled company already operating outside Korea, successfully almost completing its first nuclear reactor in UAE. That's a useful track record. In the case of China, the companies are effectively state-owned. And again, I think the size of the domestic market and the financial strength of China now means that they can also deliver. I think the same is true of Russia. Rosatom has got a considerable global business now. It has supplied and helped to finance the building of reactors in many countries outside Europe. So I think you've got three opportunities there, all of which are people who would be able to deliver whatever contract they signed. That's why South Africa's almost got it's a buyer's market in a sense. If South Africa plays its cards well, you could get a really good deal. The cost of nuclear is going to come down significantly in the next 5 years. So by the time we actually start building here, you could get something which is really valuable. And the point about nuclear is, with the concern about climate change, that's only going to get stronger. That every country needs to have a reliable source of low-carbon electricity. Of course, renewables can make a contribution, and I'm delighted that solar is expanding here, wind is expanding here, but you can't run an economy entirely on renewable energy which suffers from intermittency. You've got to have some backup, and if the backup's going to be low carbon, you've got to have some nuclear. Well, I think two things will happen. I think firstly, South Africa will miss the chance to become the leader in the African continent on nuclear. I think if South Africa goes ahead now, the supply chain work will be focused here in South Africa. There's a huge economic benefit and employment benefit from that. That opportunity would be missed. I think secondly, South Africa might find itself in a position where I know the estimates, the projections of how much electricity will be used have been going down. I think what that overlooks is that the concern in big cities now about the air quality. I was in China last week. China is in a panic now about the air quality. It's shortening the life expectancy. And you've got here, take Johannesburg, a lot of pretty well off, strong views, middle class people who don't want their kids brought up in a city which has air pollution. So the chances are by 2030 electric vehicles will become a really big factor. We don't see that yet, but it can happen very quickly, and it will be led by China. Now that could increase the need for electricity very dramatically. What you don't want is a situation where you can't cope with that. You can't suddenly switch on a nuclear power station. You can do a gas station in a couple of years, but the gas is going to have to be imported, and you don't know what the price will be by that time anyway. So that's why I think the decisions do need to be made soon. And let's recognise that renewables and nuclear, it's not one or the other, they complement each other. We need them both.